What if the greatest transformation of your life is still ahead of you? Imagine if the emotional, physical, and spiritual challenges of midlife were actually the gateway to unlocking your deepest power, purpose, and pleasure. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Ashley Turner, licensed psychotherapist and renowned yoga and meditation expert. In this conversation, Ashley will talk to us about how the mental and emotional shifts of menopause are not obstacles, but powerful invitations for deeper healing and self-discovery. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to inspiring midlife women to feel more connected to their bodies, pleasure, and power through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health and sexual wellness coach, and it is my pleasure to be here with you. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce my guest and new friend, Ashley Turner, whose work seamlessly blends the realms of psychology, yoga philosophy, and menopausal wellness. Ashley is a licensed marriage and family psychotherapist, a renowned yoga and meditation expert, and the brilliant mind behind Yoga, Psyche, Soul. She leads international retreats, works with individuals and couples, consults for companies, and lectures in academic settings. What makes Ashley's work truly unique is her mission to reshape the way we talk about menopause. She's here to help women reframe this pivotal transition, not as a loss or a decline, but as an initiation into a whole new phase of empowerment. Imagine menopause not as a struggle to survive, but as a powerful awakening, a redefinition of self, purpose, and vitality. In today's conversation, we'll dive into Ashley's personal menopause journey and learn about her new program, Metamorphosis, which supports women in mastering midlife, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. If you've ever felt lost or disconnected during this phase of life, you're not alone, and you definitely don't want to miss what Ashley has to share. So grab a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable, and let's welcome Ashley Turner to the show. Welcome, Ashley. So beautiful to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
We met at the Swell event. You are my new friend. So the Swell event, for those of you who are listening, was a powerful symposium that was held in New York City. It was hosted by the phenomenal Naomi Watts, who's the founder of a brand called Stripes Beauty, and Alyssa Volkman, who is the founder of a midlife community called Swell. And it was really a full day of celebration, education, community, and empowerment around the theme of menopause. And we unpacked so many things, the full spectrum of menopause, with so many thought-provoking talks by leading experts in the country. We debunked HRT myths, we redefined aging, we looked into brain health, muscle and bone health, heart health, grief. But I think my biggest takeaway was the community and connection and learning and getting to meet people like you and making new friends. That's what it's all about. Because I always say we need a village to get through menopause, don't we, Ashley?
Yeah, it was so inspiring, and I'm so grateful to be here with you and just to know you. And you were so friendly, and I really felt that. You mentioned how friendly this community is, and these powerhouse women that are such an inspiration. They're trailblazers, they're disruptors. We are really changing the narrative of menopause and midlife, and just a real movement of badass women. And yet everyone is so humble, everyone is really friendly, connected, and you can feel the desire and the recognition that we're all in this together. We're all rising together. I mean, I even love that image of the swell, that this is our time. Our generation is changing the narrative and requiring a different level of medical care, a different level of attention. And it's really thrilling. It's exciting.
What were some of your biggest insights from that day? Were there any talks that really stood out for you? I'm curious.
I think my biggest overall takeaway, because I was in New York like you were for the whole week, and it was, World Menopause Day, Menopause Awareness Month, of course. We were there for Tamsin Fidel's M Factor documentary premiere the night before. And I was at a couple of other events, menopause and mental health event on Thursday night. And it's just, I think for me, the biggest takeaway was to feel the electric excitement and passion, and that this is an exploding movement. This is really, I believe that this movement of menopause and midlife And what we're seeing with so much more conversation, of course, on social media and education, sort of the democratization of education, is changing the shape of our culture and changing certainly the shape of women's lives for our generation and those to come. And what I love so much, my greatest takeaway is like, it's women changing this. It's
Mhm.
not men. I mean, there are a few men there for sure. Dr. Avram Blooming is one of the pioneers as well. But for the most part, it's women. We are taking this into our own hands. We are recognizing that if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And we are disrupting from the inside out and forcing a different conversation. And the medical establishment, the government, they're being forced to listen and really take this in and make changes that have been needed for decades. So it's really exciting. I'm so proud of women. I don't think I've ever been this passionate about a topic in my entire 30-year career, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, same. And it shows from you. And I think that's what brought us together, our passion and the realization. That light bulb moment for me was like, oh my gosh, we are the first generation of women to receive this education, to receive this transmission from these incredible experts who've spent their lives trying to debunk some of the myths
Mhm.
of menopause, to really help women thrive and not just survive in menopause.
Yeah.
And people are listening. Women are craving this information. I loved seeing all these women in the room furiously taking notes. I was too, right? And buying all the books and really learning. And I felt we were in that bubble of learning together, and I could just
Mhm.
feel our brain cells just connecting and really firing up with all this new information that we're really hearing for the very first time, and
Yeah.
how incredibly lucky we are.
Yeah.
And it's only going to serve the generation of women who follow us, right? It's not only
Mhm.
going to serve us, but the generation of women who follow us. It did make me a little bit sad to think that, the generation of our mothers didn't get to benefit from some of this information. There was the discussion, as you mentioned, by Dr. Avram Blooming and his colleague, Dr. Carol Tavris. For anyone who don't know, they're incredible social scientists. They wrote this book that I have in my hands called Estrogen Matters, which focuses on the benefits of estrogen and why taking hormones in menopause can improve women's well-being. Now, we're not going to talk about taking hormones today, but it did make me really realize the discussion they engaged in around the cognitive dissonance. That was the word they used, cognitive dissonance, in relation to the irrefutable evidence that the 2002 Women's Health Initiative got it wrong when it came to the safety of menopausal hormone therapy for most women, and a whole generation of women were taken off of it.
Yeah.
And so we now have a choice, right? We now have a choice of whether or not to take it. And we all deserve this information
Mhm.
about it. We all deserve a conversation with our doctors. Whether or not to take hormones is an individual choice, but we deserve that information, and we deserve to allow all women to make those choices. They talked about how people, along with this cognitive dissonance, people want to hold on to their beliefs
Mhm.
that it's wrong, that it's not natural, and that it's either or. Right. And you and I have resided in this world of women's health, women's wellness, the yoga world, where there can be a lot of that cognitive dissonance, that there's only one way, that the natural route is the way to go. And that's why I love your work and seeing you step into this, because you're going to educate your community that there are a myriad of options for us, and they may include hormone therapy. And so I would love to start this conversation by asking you, Ashley, to share a little bit about your menopause story. Was it even spoken about in your family or your community? How did you come to focus on menopause and mental health in this moment?
Well, it's been for me sort of a choiceless choice. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and I have been working primarily with women for 25 years. I'm a longtime yoga and meditation teacher, had an entire school on yoga therapy, taught hundreds of both mental health professionals and yoga professionals about the integration of the two, also working as a psychedelic assisted therapist. And I was very blessed to have my daughter at 46 years old, an IVF miracle baby. And at the time, which was 4 years ago, I just turned 50. I didn't realize, it was such a journey, my fertility journey, and then postpartum and recovering from that birth and breastfeeding. I didn't think about the fact that I was in perimenopause. And I also want to underscore, I didn't want to think about the fact that I was in perimenopause. I had my own internalized ageism and thought, oh, well, it's going to like happen in my 50s. It was very obscure. I didn't really know timelines. I didn't know when to expect any what symptoms to even consider looking for in perimenopause. I was just in postpartum bubble. And essentially, my hormones fell off a cliff because I had this interesting convergence, which many women do. And it's a very big subgroup of women that are having children later in life. And then their postpartum recovery is overlapping. You and I've talked a little bit about that with their perimenopausal journey. So the hormonal impact can be compounded, but also the energetic and mental health and physiology, the physical recovery aspect, and the mental emotional recovery aspect is also compounded. So I essentially hit rock bottom about 2 years ago, and I didn't realize that I was in perimenopause. Again, I had some kind of inklings, but I hadn't really gotten my hormones tested. I hit extreme burnout and was really in crisis for about a year. And here I am, a licensed therapist, longtime wellness professional, and I didn't really know where to turn. I didn't seek and advocate for my own care. And I think that's very common for women as well. I was so busy tending to a young child. We remodeled a house, trying to keep my business afloat, figure out, how to keep building and growing and do it all, that I didn't really take the symptoms that I was experiencing seriously. And it took a pretty big crisis in my relationship, crisis in my business, absolute, just barely functioning in my life with sleep deprivation and the symptoms I was having and the brain fog, until finally one of my friends, who's an incredible functional nutritionist and is older, in her 60s, took me aside and was like, we were at dinner and she was like, you don't need to be suffering like this. We got to get your hormones checked. So for me, and then I got my hormones checked and I got on hormone replacement therapy, which really started to save me. But what I realized looking back was I was at one of the leading fertility clinics in the world. I'm in West LA, so really have access to incredible cutting edge medical care. My gynecologist I've been with for 20 plus years, also incredible, very progressive. My obstetrician who delivered my baby when I was 46, world class, just top of the line. My acupuncturist, all of these people are leading in their fields. And not one person, and half of them were women, older women than me, not one person took me as a patient or client and said, hey, you know what? You're having a daughter at 46. You probably already fully in perimenopause. So awesome. You're having this daughter. And we need to talk about your hormonal journey. We need to talk about your postpartum recovery. Let's figure out how to support you on this journey. There's a lot going on anyway with having a baby. And then on top of it, we need to look forward to the perimenopausal journey and really support you. What are your resources? What are your supports? Let's start testing your labs. And I was instead just floundering out there by myself. And so I furiously started doing my own research. Luckily, as you said, there's so many people online, Mary Claire Haver, Kelly Kasper, I mean, just so many people that are offering such incredible information and education. And I started to get educated and learn what was happening. And for me, it was really interesting because so many of my symptoms were mental and emotional health. And I erroneously thought to just look for hot flashes. I was having night sweats, but my acupuncturist was only asking me if I was having night sweats. There was no conversation around anxiety, depression, lack of loss of confidence, lack of agency, lack of sex drive, these things that were dramatically impacting the quality of my life and my own health. I even was having mild suicidal ideation, which I don't say lightly. I say it because for the fact that I was even having mild considerations of that, like, whoa, I'm at such a low. Is it even worth it? Is really serious. And I was trying to reach out a little bit to my family or my sisters. And I think there's a real cultural conversation that we need to have, of course, around mental health. And as a therapist, I'm also really passionate about that because sometimes people are raising their hand and they're kind of trying to ask for help in subtle ways with my partner, with my siblings. And people are busy. We live in a culture that's very separated, that's very isolationist, that's very busy. We're inundated, and we are not focused on community and supporting and really looking out for each other in subtle and big ways. So for me, that was my journey. And then once I started to stabilize, it just became clear that what I saw in the menopause movement was so much conversation around the physiology, the hormone conversation, metabolic health, long-term health span for women. So crucial, so important. That's the foundation. But what I didn't see was a strong conversation and education around the mental emotional health component. And what I realized was even when I got on hormones, it really decreased my symptoms, but I was left with some sincere challenges psychologically. And that is normal for midlife. Things like overwhelm, caring for aging parents and young children or children, big changes in our career, these bigger psychological issues that can come up and often come up in midlife that we may not tend to, we may not pay attention to. It's hard to carve out the time and space to really do this kind of inner work, as you say. And aging is a real factor. And for me, part of the depression and lack of confidence was the fact that I was aging. I did, just turn 50. I'm having more wrinkles, gray hair. Like, this is a conversation we need to normalize and break open instead of trying to push it under the rug. And
Mm.
so while I love so much, I'm so thrilled with what's happening in the menopause space. I think there's a real need for the next dimension of this conversation, which is not just the medicalized physical focus on physical symptoms, but the inclusion of what's happening in our minds, in our hearts, in our relationships, in our relationship to ourselves in midlife, because it's totally normal. This is a normal psychological phase of development.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I felt so emotional as you were saying it because yes, so many aspects of your story resonate with mine. And yeah, this fact that you were deep in the wellness world and still were left in the dark. You were
Yeah,
in the dark even though you were
absolutely.
all these
Absolutely.
I think that's a reflection of the very sad state that we find ourselves in this country with
Mhm.
regard to women's health, women's reproductive health, women's menopausal health. And it's events like the one that we went to in New York City that's starting to shift the tide and shift the narratives. And I agree that so much of the focus is on the physical symptoms and rightly so, because the physical symptoms are debilitating. But there's so many. I love that you use this word dimension, this whole new dimension. Menopause is a multidimensional experience for sure. You have the physical, you have the mental, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual, and all of those aspects need to be addressed. And I've certainly been grappling with all of those issues as well. And so that's why I was so happy to meet you and eager to have this conversation. You frame menopause with regards to this conversation. You frame it as a psycho spiritual journey.
Mhm.
I love that word. I love seeing it through that lens. And you see it as a time in which we can step into the power of the feminine. Those are the words I've heard you use. Can you, for our audience who hasn't heard this terminology and who are, I'm sure, very curious, can you share what this psycho spiritual journey entails and why it's such a pivotal part of a woman's transition through menopause?
Yeah. Well, I think if we look at it might be helpful to consider the framework of psychological development and developmental phases in psychology. So it's really easy to see with children when you have a child and they're going through very specific developmental phases. Many of us have an app and we're watching, oh, they're 6 months, they're 12 months, they're going through this, they're going to walk, and we recognize that there are certain skills that we build both physically and psychologically along the way, and social emotional skills. We build those at different phases of our life. And then often when we get to adulthood, we kind of lose track that we're still in this natural arc of a lifespan and we have different psychological phases. And so in our young adulthood, much of our focus often goes to building a career or building a family, seeking a partner, finding a mate. Then we find a mate and partner, marriage, building that unit together, children, all of that in our child rearing years. And then once we start to get to midlife, of course, things have changed societally. Again, many people are having children later, but many people are also in that empty nester phase. And so then it's a very different phase of development internally in our psychology. So that could look like a re identification where we've been identified for decades by being a partner, maybe, I don't want to genderize this conversation, but maybe a mother, a father, a partner, a husband, a wife. Maybe we have some identity in our career and we've built up these achievements and we have this certain persona or the things that we relate to the world in a certain way. And then when we get to this midlife, I think of it as a crossroads where especially menopause and the average age of menopause in the United States is 51 years old, and that means that's the last period that you have, and then you're postmenopausal. So that 50-year-ish mark is a really good marker to consider. Midlife, we would consider maybe a little younger as well. So we're about halfway through our life if we're lucky, at least we have 30 to 50%, let's say, of our life left to live, hopefully, if we're lucky. And yet, many of us were thriving in our careers. We maybe sort of peaked, or we have a certain level of success or position, and maybe our children are leaving. And so this is where we get into that conversation of, I really don't like this term, but the midlife crisis. But essentially, it's a deep questioning. We're also at this phase of life facing our mortality. So at midlife, and especially, once you're getting to 50 years old, you've had some nicks and bumps along the way. Maybe you've had some health diagnosis or issues. If you personally haven't, you definitely know people who have cancer diagnosis, or maybe they died unexpectedly. And so we probably lost a parent or close to that at this age. And so we're really faced with our mortality in a very different way. It's very humbling, but it brings up these bigger questions in life. Like, we're not, infallible. We will face aging and death, and we start to see that. And so there's a real reckoning that happens. And what can arise from that experience is also this deeper questioning of, am I really where I want to be? This is my life. Is this the kind of career I want to be in? Does this feel really aligned? Is this the right relationship for me for the next phase of my life? Many people get through the child rearing years and their relationship moves into a new developmental phase. And then they're wondering or questioning, are we really aligned? Do we really want to do this next part of life together? And there's no pathologizing right or wrong. It can be beautiful to, for example, build a family, have an amazing family, raise children together, be great co-parents, and then decide that, we're going to choose a different kind of partnership for the next phase of life. So these are all the bigger questions that are going on, along with, again, facing aging, facing our own relationship to our bodies and ourselves in a very different way. And I want to couple that and point out that this is coinciding with the decline in hormones. So we don't have that hormonal buffer, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, where we in the past maybe were able to tolerate things, maybe had a bigger capacity for things. And that's fine. I don't think that's necessarily sugarcoating it. But at this point, often when our hormones decline, we don't have the same kind of resilience energetically or emotionally. And our hormones play a direct role in our thoughts, in our mood, because hormones affect our neurotransmitters, which are really shaping our thoughts. And it's important to understand our thoughts are not just arbitrary. The way that our hormones and neurotransmitters are firing is directly impacting the kinds of thoughts that we're thinking. This is what I think is really interesting about the relationship of hormones and psychology, which is not talked about that much. In my own career as a psychotherapist, there was never one single conversation in all of my years of study and traineeship, studying for my exams, not one conversation, not one question on the exam, 2 different board exams, of the relationship between hormones and mental health. So this, again, is just highlighting a big way that our medical system needs to evolve, and the way that we have a lack of care and even research and understanding. So That's many different aspects, but that's just to say that midlife is presenting a whole new set of challenges and I would say opportunities. So to get to the spiritual part of your question, psycho spiritual, it's a real opportunity for us to connect with ourselves in a much bigger and deeper way, especially if maybe our requirements and responsibilities in the household have mellowed a little bit. And hopefully we can carve out some time to sit with and ask these bigger questions and make more intentional decisions.
I love that. So beautiful. I hear the word identity, right? That's what's standing out for me. It's
Definitely.
I'm looking at how we've identified and redefining our identity and how we want to identify our roles. And you talk about the psychological aspect of that. I'm really curious, as a long time yoga teacher, meditation teacher. I know you talk a lot about the psychology of yoga, or the yoga of psychology. And I remember when I was training as a yoga teacher, and in my many years as a yoga teacher, that was really a big question from the very beginning. Who am I? Right? That was
Mhm.
one of the first questions that we were taught to inquire deeply about. Who am I? And again, over and over and again, but it becomes so much more powerful at this crossroads, right? I'd love for you to talk about, how can women answer this question? Who am I? How do they start to reconnect with themselves, or even redefine themselves in midlife?
Yeah, this is such a great, it's really the heart. You're getting to the heart of the whole issue or challenge or opportunity that we face. And the question of who am I, it's much bigger than our persona, our ego identity, than it's really, we're not talking about an external appearance of who we are based on relationship, finances, body, all the different roles and responsibilities that we have. We're talking about a deeper spiritual question. And the answer is, you're a soul. We are all souls having a human experience. And we each have, so for me, everything kind of comes back to this word soul. And it begs us to ask different questions. So instead of, oh, why me? Why did this happen to me? Maybe this trauma or this betrayal or whatever it is in our lives. We ask the question, okay, what is the lesson that I'm here to learn? What is my soul lesson? And we can also then see the superpowers that we've created from different experiences in our lives. And it allows us to just open up the aperture and have a much different perception of who we are and what we're doing here in this life. But the heart of it, especially I think at midlife for anyone, is, and this is where I think the root of this, sort of concept of midlife crisis comes in, is that, and I can relate to this myself, by the way, because I've been in this phase, and I would say I have been in a crisis. We've gone through our life and we've had several decades, 4 or 5 decades. We've arrived at some place. We've had, again, some versions of external success, challenges that we faced. And now we get here and we're, again, a reckoning with, well, we realize that those achievements or things that we've acquired, whether it's possessions, relationships, money, children, the satisfaction that they bring are futile. And now we're really getting into the spiritual realm of like, what's it all for? And I think that's a question that can come up for people at this age of, what's it all for? Like, I have these things and yet maybe I'm not so happy right now. Or maybe this relationship doesn't really fulfill me, or this career really fulfill me. And again, it's that relationship with time where we're facing our mortality and we're looking at, is this the way I want to spend the rest of my life? What does bring me true fulfillment? What brings me true pleasure, which is why I love your work so much, to really establish a new relationship with deep, abiding pleasure and peace. And that is probably not coming from the same things that we have pursued up until now. To some degree, yes, of course, loved ones, children, family, experiences, adventure, those are very valid things. But I think it begs a deeper questioning and this sitting with, who am I? And allowing that, especially for women in midlife, to change. Because who we may have been and what we may have wanted up until now may change. And we may find that our yeses are different now. And so there's often a phase, I think, psychologically, where the first phase of perimenopause. And I'm really talking about that zone of chaos, like 1 to 2 years right before our period ends. So symptoms can start much earlier, 7 to 10 years, most people say. And maybe that psychological inquiry and questioning does arise. But for many of us, it's the last couple years right before our last bleed. The first phase is often the no. And we start to just get, and it looks like irritability and it looks like anger or rage, where things just, we can't tolerate it. We're realizing like we're pissed off. We're actually pissed off. We don't want to do this much stuff. We don't want to hold all these responsibilities. Or maybe there are inequities in labor, at home, or at work, whatever it is. Maybe it's social issues that are really propelling us, irritating us. So it can look like anger and irritability, but those are symptoms, just like hot flashes or, night sweats or sleep issues are symptoms of what's going on underneath. So we look at this physical symptoms and we recognize those are coming from hormonal deficiencies and chaos. The psychological symptoms, difficult emotions, are symptoms of what's going on underneath the surface in our psyche and in our unconscious. And so, of course, as a therapist, like that's what I'm really interested in helping people identify. Well, what's coming up? Let's get curious. Let's hold compassion. What is it that you're really irritable about? And so for myself, I'll just use as an example, I had to really start having different conversations with my partner, with myself around the way I was relating to my work and just saying, you know what? I can't stay up after 10 o'clock at night. I can't even stay up after 9, 8 o'clock at night. I can't burn the candle at both ends. I don't want to anymore. It doesn't work. Or things in my partnership that weren't working that we had to really start addressing in a different way. So the psychological symptoms or the difficult emotions are great guideposts teaching us how to tend to this inner dialogue in a different way. I really recommend, people get support, just like you're going to get your medical team, your physician, find the right person to help you figure out your plan for hormones and resources. Do the same in the realm of your mental, emotional, and even spiritual health. And who are those people that can really guide you and help you uncover and unpack this quite big piece of work, psychological work? And it can be exciting. It doesn't have to be like a heavy trip. I think that's the reshaping the narrative of menopause is like, this is an exciting time. We do have the opportunity to ask different questions and to reshape our identity, even our lives. And some things will last and land, and a lot of things may shapeshift and change. And that's a really exciting time. There's a lot of possibility. It's an opportunity for us to step into our voice and our truth in a much different way. And it's liberating.
Yeah, I hear the word self-advocacy coming up, right? We really need to step into our self-advocacy using our voice. I heard you talk about boundaries, really tuning
Yeah.
into our yes and our no and having those conversations, those difficult conversations about the changes that need to happen in the way that we relate to other people and the work that we're doing and how much energy we're expending. And that self-advocacy arises from these emotions that are coming up, the anger, the irritability, right? Do you feel that as a yoga practitioner, a longtime yoga teacher, it's been easier for you to really listen in? Because it's a listening in, right? It's a listening in and attending to those emotions that are arising. I feel that yoga offers us that gift of inner awareness. What advice do you have for listeners to step into that inner awareness, that inner listening to those more difficult emotions? You mentioned getting a therapist, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. Are there any other ways that we can really step into honoring those difficult emotions?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest tool is for people to implement space and rest and
Mm,
really claim and create structures in your life that will support your deep rest. And I'm not talking about resting and meditating or doing a yoga nidra or I'm talking about real carved out alone time, quiet time, not on your phone, not scrolling social media or reading something, but really just being with yourself. And that requires for most of us, this is not the way that our culture is set up. And we do still have responsibilities and jobs, children's household responsibilities that we need to tend to. So I think one of the first steps in getting resourced is to take a step back, look at your life and ask where you can let go. Where can you streamline? Where can you minimize your commitments? Do less, really actually go for the bare minimum for a while. This is not the rest of your life, but maybe I like to give people a set time. My Metamorphosis it's not a training, it's more of a mentorship, which is 6 months long. And it's a long time. It's a significant amount of time, but it's good to give ourselves a clear, sacred space container where we're saying, you know what, I'm going to dedicate some time and energy and money to my own personal journey and really assess what's going on in myself and my life, habits that are working that aren't. And it takes time to do that and it takes space. And it's really quite difficult for most of us to carve that out. We might notice that we feel guilty or we feel like it's too self-indulgent or we don't deserve it. So it can bring up a lot of issues around worth. And yet looking at this is your life. This is your life. And if you keep going the same the train has already left the station. There's a lot of momentum with your life going the way that it is. And it will just continue to go that way unless you take a pause. And I think, again, that's one of the great teachings of perimenopause, menopause, is to really pause and create some space in your life and just, say for 6 months, for a year, I'm gonna not expect a lot from myself. I'm gonna give myself a break. I'm gonna be much more compassionate and let me take the space to listen inward. So rest, space, alone time, and then definitely finding the tools that help you connect with yourself. So, of course, yoga, meditation, are incredible tools, journaling, being out in nature, and it's different for everyone. Maybe it's art, maybe it's certain places that really light you up. It's an exciting time to discover, like it's really kind of dating yourself. And maybe for many of us, especially as women, the first time in our lives that we are centering our own experience and we are placing our needs and our time and health on all levels, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, at the center of our lives and saying, this is my absolute priority for this phase of life. For again, even if it helps to just look at it temporarily, most of us after menopause, there is sort of a second spring. I mean, I'm not there yet. But from what I hear, and we know the hormones stabilize and they may not be at the same level as before, but we're not in that zone of chaos. If you can give yourself that time within the zone of chaos, of hormonal chaos, to really be still, be quieter, and just, I know for myself, and I hear this from many people, they're just craving alone time. Like all I've wanted to do in the last year is be alone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't really want to see that many people. I would love to go to a cabin in the woods quite often and just be with myself. So to whatever degree you can start to carve that out, I think would be extremely helpful. And as you mentioned, really connecting with community and like-minded people going through this journey and other sisters and women, people that can support you, that understand.
It is really about healing, isn't it? I feel like so much of the focus on menopause, as you mentioned at the beginning, is about fixing. Let's fix the hot flashes, fixing the physical symptoms, which we definitely want to do. But there's this component that I hear you speak about that's really about deep healing. And I feel like if we just take a step back and see it, this is a time of rest. This is a time of healing. I love the word that you use, metamorphosis. That's the name of your new upcoming 6-month container, right? Where you're inviting, it's an invitation. So these mental health challenges that you mentioned, irritability, anger, depression, anxiety, all those are very real mind issues, right? If we look at them as invitations for a deeper healing during this life stage, I think that we could really shift the narrative around menopause, using it as a time for healing.
Yeah, absolutely. My orientation in mental health is as a depth psychotherapist. So it's very Jungian. We work a lot with Joseph Campbell's work, many depth psychologists, but looking at the unconscious in not a pathologizing way, like there's something wrong which is our medical model. It's a allopathic medicine, focuses on the symptom and tries to fix the symptom. And if we're looking in a more holistic lens, and as a depth psychotherapist, we look at any symptom. So again, whether you mentioned depression, anxiety, grief, rage, irritability, and we look at it with curiosity, like, okay, what is this trying to teach me? So we talked earlier about the soul and who am I? And I was talking about, we're these soul beings, the spiritual being in a human body. And so I would look at a symptom, and this is what I had to do with myself because my depression, anxiety was pretty overwhelming. I'm still doing this. I'm still right in the midst of this process of asking, okay, what is this depression trying to teach me? So one of my teachers used to say, depression is repression. There's some aspect of ourself that we're repressing. Maybe it's in the unconscious. Maybe it's parts of our soul that want to be expressed. What am I not attuned to? What am I not listening to that is knocking at my door? And it looks like depression. It looks like anger, but what's the deeper meaning here? And so again, for myself, I've had to really say, wow, these things don't fit. I want to be back in person with people more. I want to work with clients one on one. I want to be in a retreat environment or in a yoga room or doing psychedelic therapy. Like I miss that in person. I don't want to do everything online. That was one example for me. So what are the deeper callings that are knocking at your door? And the psychological, there's symptoms, and it's like a treasure hunt, and we start to inquire. And that's where it can be fun and it can be exciting to come more into alignment with your authentic self.
Talk to us more about Metamorphosis, your group container. What are the main pillars? What is the journey that you walk women through in this 6-month healing journey?
Yeah, it is. It's a healing journey. I call it part mystery school because we're really reclaiming the truth of perimenopause and menopause, this journey into our elderhood, into a different phase of womanhood that has really been lost, where we have, even in the medical world, a lot of research. The vast majority of research is on women in women's health is on during the reproductive years. And cancer, also plays into that. But the majority of education and research is on fertility, pregnancy, birth, and then preventative treatments for chronic disease. There's not a lot of research on the phase of menopause, the effect, as we know. Dr. Lisa Mosconi's work is the first work on scanning the brain before, during, and after menopause. That's just one example. So there's not been a lot of understanding and exploration and education around this phase. So part of Metamorphosis is a mystery school of just looking at cyclical living, reframing, looking even all the way back to our menstruality, our journey as a woman coming into our bleeding years, through our fertility years, and then into menopause, putting it in a larger context, that this is not just an error in the system, a medical issue that we need to fix, but instead, let's pull back the veil on what is our bigger journey in womanhood and where are we now in this phase and what are the opportunities before us. This part mystery school, part mentorship, because I really feel, we need that container of a small group of women, guidance, coaching, therapy, supports, and part really that incubator container that's going to hold you in your journey and that's really supportive, holding you in this field of this different way of perceiving it, different information, different tools, but also the larger group that can really support you and help hold you accountable. And we're in this together. So I broke it into 6 primary modules. And again, I look at everything holistically. I think that that's really the only healing model for us to use, is to acknowledge that we had the first 5 realms, the physical. So we start with the physical and really go into the hormonal journey, the symptoms, nutrition, fitness, how to optimize and thrive in our physical body. That's crucial. I think that's the foundation of what I call the menopause hierarchy of needs. Stabilize that, get that thriving. That's the first module. Then we go into the mental realm, which is looking at, again, the relationship between hormones, mood, neurotransmitters, more of the psychology, but also a big piece around mindset and looking at our own mindset around this journey. through perimenopause and into our elder years. We work there with Carl Jung, had an incredible framework called the 7 tasks of midlife. He went through quite a big breakthrough in his midlife, and then came up with this framework of these 7 psychological tasks that are at hand during midlife. So we work through that. The third layer is the emotional layer. There's a lot of, menopause is a time when things that have compounded over the years can come to the surface. And especially if they are things that we haven't dealt with, emotional residue, resentments, maybe past trauma. You mentioned, we were talking earlier about the relationship between a person who has a higher ACEs score, which is adverse childhood experiences, and that they could be more at risk during this time for greater symptoms. That totally makes sense with the mind body connection. So we're looking at, are there unresolved traumas? Are there emotional resentments that I'm holding on to? Grievances, which is a huge dimension of this. Things that didn't come to manifest in our lives. Maybe we wanted to have children and weren't able to. Maybe we had a relationship or marriage that broke down and we still have some sadness or grief around that. Maybe there's loss in our physicality or health, people that we've lost that we love. So really making peace and integrating those bigger, griefs in life, that's a big piece. So emotional realm. Then the fourth realm is the energetic. So we're working with the nervous system, understanding how to self-regulate, really conditioning ourselves for that deep rest. And then this is where the realm of sexuality comes in, because another huge dimension, which you know so well, which we've talked about, and I can't wait to dive into your work on the shift, the massive overhaul of our sexual identity, our sexual being. So looking at different practices to really reclaim the sexual self that we are now. The fifth layer is spiritual. And again, those deeper spiritual questions and tasks. And I do work a lot with ritual and different archetypes. So helping people connect to the wise woman archetype, really stepping into this role as elder and a sovereign leader. I firmly believe that the greatest resource on this planet is the wisdom and power and lived experience of middle age and elder women. I
So,
firmly
yeah.
believe that that is our greatest asset. And in order for elder women to be lead in positions of leadership, not only do the systems and structures have to change, but we as women have to step into that role and lead and own it and acknowledge our power and use our voices and own our rightful place in society. So for most of us, that's a pretty big piece of work, because that's a whole other topic of our conditioning and the patriarchy, but it's a big piece of the work in Metamorphosis. And then finally is this last 6 month of integration, again, working with this archetype of the Empress or the wise woman, and really looking forward to the vision of what we want to create and what is this up-leveled vision, because so much of menopause is framed through what we're losing, our
Mhm.
hormones, our sex drive, our, et cetera, et cetera. And really the reshaping is, this is the most powerful, most creative, most potent time of our lives. And so what is that vision? And then setting about creating that.
So, so beautiful. So you see it, I've heard you say that you see it as an initiation, right? How midlife
Absolutely.
is an initiation. And I love how you help women reframe the narrative to see it as an empowering threshold rather than a decline.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
for, could you share with us what mindset shifts are essential for thriving during this stage, really shattering those narratives that are so entrenched in our psyche? What can we begin to do to peel back those narratives and really step into this new powerful threshold that
Yeah.
menopause is inviting us to step through? I love the way that you frame it.
Yeah, it is really an opportunity to unleash our full power. And I just want to connect one dot, which is in those earlier, we were talking about the earlier decades, 20s, 30s, 40s, so much of our energy, and in yoga we call it shakti, like our power, our raw power, our energy is going towards our career and our relationship to other people, meaning either our career and our work in the world, or if we choose to create a family, finding a mate, finding a partner, keeping that partner, getting pregnant, having a baby, raising kids, that is an enormous amount of energy. And it takes a lot to do that. And it's for most of us, again, whether it's career or whether it's family life or both, that's absorbing most of our attention, time, and energy. When we get to this threshold and we've moved through those phases, and again, some of us are still in parenting young children, I for one am, but and the hormonal shift that accompanies it, we are less drawn and focused on the other, and all of that energy can start to be recycled into ourselves. And this is really that journey of initiation of, wow, okay, I have all of that power sort of recycling back in me. Where do I now want to place my attention, my time, my energy? What's it all for now? Obviously, being in service can be really helpful, but for some of us, maybe we just want to retreat a little bit. Maybe we want to slow down. Maybe we want to reshape our lives a little bit, but just tuning into what is your deepest truth, what's in alignment for you. And so that's the big piece of initiation. And initiation it's a challenge by definition. So we go through many initiations in our life. Puberty's initiation, getting married, having a child, getting divorced, facing the death of a loved one, facing our own death, all of these things, among many others, among any kind of trauma, any kind of big wounds or experiences that we've had, challenges we've overcome. Those are what build our resilience. Those are what literally shape us and make us who we are. They are our greatest opportunities. And this is one of them. And I believe in a woman's life or a person with a womb that's going through menopause, I believe is perhaps the greatest initiation. It is the biggest overhaul from the molecular hormonal level all the way down the line. And we really do come out as a different person. And so it's letting go of who we thought we were, or some idea that like we should get back to there, and instead looking forward with excitement. And it's an endeavor. Like we don't know where we're going to end up, and it's an adventure. Joseph Campbell talks about in the hero's journey, and we work with Maureen Murdoch's The Heroine's Journey in Metamorphosis. That's the framework that we work with. The first step is a call to adventure. We are called out of our comfort zone. We are called into a new land. We don't know where that new land is or what it looks like. And the journey is getting there. And so it's really exciting. And I also think, I want to underscore this is a new conversation, a new territory, a new awareness being placed on this in a very big way in our culture. And it's so exciting to see where this is going to go and what this is going to ignite in the full community of women in this generation and the coming generations, how we can harness this power.
So, so beautiful and so necessary. I love the way that you frame this and seeing it as an opportunity to consider what's next. And I would love to ask you, I know it'll be different for everyone, but what can women expect to gain or to take away by moving through this journey of metamorphosis with you and your community?
Thank you so much for asking. Well, I think number one, the first aim is to really educate and help everyone get oriented to this journey. And that's also with hormonal experts and nutritionists, and just get a plan, start to feel less overwhelmed and inundated, and just step by step come up with a plan so everyone starts to feel like they're thriving, they're nourishing themselves, they're feeling better, their symptoms are relieved. That is, as I said, the first module that we go through. And then confidence and a renewed sense of worth and a renewed sense of purpose, a more aligned sense of purpose. So that brings a lot of peace. That brings a lot more ease. It does, again, there's a piece of work there. It is requiring us to cut away and release those things that no longer serve. And it's not overnight. That's why I like to give us at least 6 months to really commit to this journey. I also have a membership that people can stay in this conversation and gain more and more tools, a yoga, meditation, holistic mental health membership called The Haven for Midlife Women. So there's ongoing support and conversation around this, but it's really a reframe and it's very exciting. I think there's also a lot of relief, a lot of people that go through this that are making peace with their past and really laying down that baggage and letting it go and feeling free and feeling lighter and feeling more clear and really feeling connected to very deep, heart-centered, loving, compassionate community, which we need, and inspired because this is the best time of our lives.
I definitely feel lighter, more peaceful just listening to you. I definitely felt like this softening in my shoulders and like
Mm.
I let out like exhale. Thank you so much for this conversation, Ashley. I love that you focus on sexuality and pleasure as a central theme and metamorphosis. And
And you're
I
coming in as one of our guest teachers.
about it. I always ask my guests who join me on the podcast, what does pleasure mean to you, Ashley?
Well, honestly, as I said, right now, pleasure looks like alone time and just
Mm,
time doing whatever I want, which I don't do enough of. I'm really also taking my own medicine here, learning how to do that. For me, it certainly is involved. It involves the body, being in my body, feeling really good in my body. So that's things like training, working out, lifting weights has been, huge, feels so good to me right now. Yoga, being out in nature, adventure, going to places that I've never been, or adventure and travel with my loved ones. Like that is a huge source of pleasure for me. And being in service, really doing my work and being with women in these retreats, in these environments, going deep, feeling that connection, that's very pleasurable to me. Yeah.
oh, I love all of that. Thank you so much. So, where can our listeners begin this journey of metamorphosis with you? Where do they go?
Yes, well, definitely. I think Instagram is the easiest place. Ashley Turner, the number one on Instagram. All the links are in my bio there. And then you can, we can just connect. Please DM me, send me a little voice memo, let me know your questions. I'm here for you. I'm here to support. I really like to connect with people personally there. And my website is yoga-psychology.co and, or Ashley Turner. You can just go to ashleyturner.co. But
Mhm.
Instagram is probably the easiest.
Okay, I'll make sure to put that all in the show notes. And when does the course start?
It's ongoing. So, but the new version of the course, the next cohort is starting in November, but people can join anytime. So, anytime you're listening to this, you can join. And also, I have a beautiful 108 journal prompts to release, rinse, and heal difficult emotions. So, if this is of interest to you to really take this, mental, emotional health journey during menopause, I'd love to offer that to everyone free as well.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful for your time, for your presence, and for really taking us in this conversation through this metamorphosis, this healing journey of menopause. Thank you so, so much, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Gabriella, for all of your work. And thank you so much for listening. Definitely send me any questions. I'm here for all of you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Lots of love. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pleasure in the Pause. Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Hit the share episode button and send it to a friend or post it on your Instagram stories and tag me, Gabriella Espinosa. And if you really love this podcast, please leave a rating or review, as this helps the show get in front of new listeners. Finally, if you would like to access even more pleasure and stay in touch, sign up for my free pleasure upgrade bundle of powerful mind-body practices by going to pleasureinthepause.com. Remember, your pleasure matters.